you're going to bark up the wrong tree if you think you're going to persuade a Brit that we should stop drinking alcohol because of people arriving in our country. I mean, that's not going to happen.
Welcome back. We are again here to watch some heated arguments between Douglas Murray and a Muslim girl, but there's more to it. Well, this debate is happening in Doha, Qatar, one of the countries that are involved in interfering in the affairs of Syria and making things worse. In this debate, people are gathered to have a discussion about the issue of global migration and how this is affecting developed nations and creating hatred and violence among some minorities and social groups. After Murray had completed his argument, the audience got the chance to ask questions to the panel, and a Muslim girl asked this question to Murray.
Us serving justice, and do you think it's judicious for these people in Britain, for example, you talked about how Britain is giving aid to these countries in Africa, it's judicious for them to give this much money to these countries but without even listening to their needs?
Earlier, when Murray was giving his speech, he talked about the financial aid given by Britain to sub-Saharan and African countries, as they are the second largest to provide such financial aid. Hence, she was talking about it. She has pointed out a good question whether they asked about the needs of the people living in those countries or just gave away the money just to look good in front of everyone. She also uses a word that triggers Murray and makes the debate more interesting.
This only contributes to the white savior complex that is currently a big issue in Africa.
Those who are not familiar with the term white savior complex, let me break it down for you. The white savior complex, also known as white saviorism, is an ideology in which a white person asserts supremacy in order to save a BIPOC, black, indigenous, or person of color, individual or community. This perspective frequently emerges during humanitarian disasters or when observing the daily inequities experienced by BIPOC members. It poses the question, are your efforts actually addressing structural difficulties impacting BIPOC employees, or are they mostly about making yourself feel better? The white savior complex implies that such initiatives may privilege the rescuer's self-image over actual structural change. So, according to this girl, what Britain is doing is just WSC and nothing else. But what Murray has in his pocket is befitting and truthful. He uses a really amazing quote that perfectly fits this scenario.
Policy. Well, there is a saying we have, damned if you do and damned if you don't. If it's the case that if we don't give aid, we'd be accused of not giving aid, and if we do give aid, it's a white savior.
Murray says it perfectly, and shows the world that you will get cursed for not helping others, and also get treated as the white savior if you help people. This double-faced mindset of people is one of the reasons that they remain underdeveloped and seek help from others. When someone helps you, you should show him gratitude and say thank you. But nowadays it is called an act of improving self-image. Let's listen to him completely and see how the audience will react to his reply.
We can all give aid better, for sure, and I just gave in my opening remarks what I think was a serious suggestion for one very good use of aid, which is to prioritize it in the region and in the neighboring countries of places people are fleeing from. But
well, I agree with Murray about the fact that the Western countries have provided the best that they could, and as he mentioned earlier, people fleeing from war-torn zones should reside near their boundaries so that they come back to their homelands when the situation gets better. But people took it otherwise and accused them of white saviorism, which is not good. Well, there's no doubt about the work that European countries have done to improve the conditions of the refugees that came there, and they not just came to seek asylum but also took advantage of the freedom they got there and started residing there for generations now. Though Murray refuses to agree to what the girl is implying that the financial aid is causing trouble in their country, but there are myriad reasons behind the adverse conditions in the area. Not only this lady, but a man also raised a question to Murray about what he had spoken about the developing world cannot move to a developed world and build a question around it.
Every year, the developed world sends about $300 billion of aid to the developing world, but the developing world sends back trillions in debt repayments to the developed world. Now, don't you think that this is the main reason why migrants are moving to Europe? Because
he is claiming that due to the debt repayments, the money is moving out from the developing countries, and this is why people are moving to Europe and the developed nations. He brings up a point that most people think what he's saying is correct, but that's not the case. It is assumed that the developing nations will use the aid to run projects and build infrastructure to develop their economy, but instead, the politicians are doing corruption and scams, using the funds for their personal use and benefits, which is completely wrong. And I believe Murray will agree with my words.
You think that if for instance, all African countries were allowed to default on debt, that they'd become burgeoning, flourishing societies? You think that the problem across, for instance, sub-Saharan Africa isn't just unbelievable greed and theft by politician after politician?
Well, as I predicted, Murray's words are aligned with mine, as he talks about the same thing. You can't just have developed economies if you still have corrupt, greedy, and looter politicians in your country. No country can flourish just by defaulting debt repayments, even though they are allowed, and people need to understand that money brings money. Politicians and institutions should work together to achieve what these developed nations have, and for that, they need to invest the funds in the economy rather than their accounts. Moving forward to another Muslim lady who's talking about the racism her mother and family faced since they were already among the educated people of the UK.
When my mother arrived in the UK and her parents arrived in the UK, people still called them dirty Pakis. When she had graduated from Oxford University, she was still a brown person who was...
She talks about the discrimination that she and her family faced during their time in the United Kingdom, and also about the scenario that they still can't be recognized as citizens or humans by some of the people in the same society they are living in. She talks about the dehumanizing attitude of people toward them just because they are refugees and they have been living there for generations now, and still, people can't accept them as one and use racial slurs against them. Well, the moderator asked Murray to comment on this, as according to her, he's the one who is there, who's playing the US versus them character.
And Douglas seems to be about the us versus them, the fact that, we have our own values, our own Britishness, our own virtues, and they will come to our shores with their values, their traditions. You seem to almost suggest that they come to your countries with a lesser breed of values.
Well, after I had listened to this whole debate, I couldn't find the timestamp where Murray has talked about this thing in particular, but his arguments for sure imply that he isn't a big fan of the Muslim community. She says that they have their traditions and virtues, but they are not aligned with those of Western societies, and this indicates that Western people think of them as people with fewer values. However, Murray has a different viewpoint from what the moderator has said.
Look, first of all, I didn't say that. I said that there are challenges because we do know that there are challenges. And let's just be frank about this. I mean, for instance, I've been in the Gulf for the last week or so. I see more burqas in my home city of London than I have seen in the Gulf in recent days, certainly here in Doha.
As I have said before, he hadn't said such derogatory words, but he implies that he isn't a fan of seeing burqas more in London or New York than they are in Doha, the capital of an Islamic state. He doesn't hate Muslims or their culture or traditions, but he just isn't fond of them. But that doesn't mean he could start complaining about it. On the other side, they are always crying about the things they don't like, as they do not like what is described in the Quran. Yet, the moderator again pointed out something that escalated the debate.
Everyone else,
but again, is it all down to burqas? Because again, you're not asking people with other traditions whether they care about the sight of people drinking alcohol or showing up in bikinis. Again, it's a very
we could in Britain
Western-centric viewpoint.
I'm not. I have to say, you're going to bark up the wrong tree if you think you're going to persuade a Brit that we should stop drinking alcohol because of people arriving in our country. I mean, that's not going to happen.
I just can't control my laughter at this moment, as he mentioned there. Well, it is obvious that people just can't stop wearing bikinis or drinking alcohol in public just because it is prohibited in the Quran or something like that. In these Western countries, everyone has greater freedom, and they have been living like this for a long time. They can't change their way of life just because some refugees become citizens of their country. Well, that's it for today. I believe you guys have enjoyed this debate, as it is full of humor and heated arguments. So, the takeaway from today's video is that we should mind our business rather than poking our noses at others, but you also can't ignore anyone who is seeking help from you. As a fellow human being, you must help the other person.